In the 1970s, the western suburbs of Chicago looked like a picture of stability. Quiet streets, nearly identical houses with trimmed lawns, neighbors who waved to each other in the mornings, children riding their bikes without fear. It was the kind of place where danger was something that happened somewhere else. In one of those ordinary homes lived a man named John Wayne Gacy, a construction business owner, a local political volunteer, a friendly, talkative neighbor, and sometimes a clown who performed at children's parties. Nothing about his public image suggested horror. If anything, he projected confidence and respectability, but behind that carefully constructed exterior was a hidden reality that would later shock the entire country. A reality that did not surface overnight, but slowly layer by layer through. Investigation. How does someone live a double life for years without being exposed? And how can an entire community see the surface while missing what lies underneath? Before we go further, make sure to subscribe to Voices of Crime and turn on notifications, because some cases are not just stories, they're lessons in how easily appearances can deceive. John Wayne Gacy was born in 1942 in Chicago. Accounts of his childhood describe a difficult relationship with his father, who was reportedly harsh and critical. Later psychological discussions often pointed to his need for validation and control, an intense drive to present himself as successful, respected, and powerful. As a young adult, Gacy worked various jobs before establishing himself in the construction business. In the early 1970s, he founded his own contracting company. The company handled maintenance and remodeling work, and it frequently hired teenage boys and young men looking for quick income. At the time, background checks were not as rigorous as they are today. There were no centralized digital databases that connected information across counties. Trust was often based on first impressions and reputation, and Gacy had built a reputation. He became active in local Democratic Party politics. He attended community events, participated in fundraisers, and was photographed with public officials. These public appearances reinforced his image as a civic-minded businessman. Then there was Pogo the Clown. Gacy would dress in a bright clown costume and perform at children's parties and charitable events. It was meant to be wholesome, entertaining, harmless. In retrospect, that image would become deeply unsettling, a symbol of the stark contrast between his public persona and the crimes later uncovered. Throughout the early and mid-1970s, young men began disappearing around Chicago and its suburbs. At first, there was no clear connection. Each missing persons report seemed isolated. A teenager who left home and never returned. A young man who vanished after heading to a job opportunity. Another who was last seen after a shift at work. Without centralized data sharing systems, law enforcement agencies struggled to connect patterns across jurisdictions. Each case was handled locally. Each file sat in its own office. Warning signs, if they existed, were fragmented. The turning point came in 1978 with the disappearance of a teenager named Robert Piest. He had told his mother he was going to meet a contractor about a job opportunity. After that, he vanished. Investigation intensified, and gradually, John Wayne Gacy's name surfaced. At first, there was no immediate, definitive proof. Gacy spoke calmly with investigators. He appeared cooperative, but inconsistencies began to emerge in his statements. Witnesses reported having seen young men enter his home. Some former employees described a behavior that made them uncomfortable. Suspicion grew. In December 1978, authorities obtained a warrant to search his home. What they discovered would permanently change the case. In the crawl space beneath the house, investigators found human remains. As excavation continued, the number increased. More than 30 victims. The ordinary suburban home concealed years of crimes. The shock was not only about the number of victims, it was about the contradiction. A man who attended political events, who shook hands with officials, who entertained children in a clown costume, had been leading a hidden life marked by violence and concealment. This case sparked intense public debate. Can social status delay suspicion? Does a strong public image act as a shield against scrutiny? Do communities sometimes trust appearances too easily? Gacy was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder. His trial began in 1980. The defense focused heavily on his mental health, arguing that he suffered from psychological disorders that affected his responsibility. The prosecution, however, emphasized repetition and planning, the pattern of luring victims with job offers, the concealment of evidence, the methodical nature of his actions. These were not random acts. They reflected a repeated behavioral pattern. After weeks of testimony and forensic evidence, John Wayne Gacy was convicted. He was sentenced to death. In 1994, his sentence was carried out, but the investigation did not simply end there. Following his conviction, authorities revisited numerous missing persons reports that had not initially been linked to him. They reviewed employment records from his contracting company, temporary hiring lists, and project schedules spanning several years. Certain names appeared across multiple documents. Certain timelines aligned with previously unexplained disappearances. Investigators began reconstructing a broader pattern of movement and activity. Where was he working during specific periods? Who was employed at those times? Which disappearances occurred within those same windows? Additionally, it was discovered that some victims had reported inappropriate behavior or disturbing encounters before they vanished. However, in the 1970s, there were no integrated digital systems to flag repeated complaints across counties. Each warning sign seemed minor on its own, but collectively, they suggested something far more serious. The case exposed institutional gaps, limited communication between jurisdictions, no centralized database for tracking patterns, slow information sharing. In the years that followed, law enforcement agencies placed greater emphasis on interdepartmental coordination and improved record-keeping systems. The importance of pattern recognition in missing persons cases became more widely acknowledged. Gacy's crimes also became a case study in criminal profiling and behavioral analysis, not only because of the number of victims, but because of the extended period during which he maintained a socially respected image. The idea of a double life became central to discussions about the case. How someone could appear stable, engaged, and trustworthy while concealing repeated acts of violence. Advancements in DNA technology in later decades allowed investigators to re-examine evidence and identify victims who had remained unnamed. For some families, those scientific developments provided long-awaited answers. The neighborhood itself eventually returned to normalcy. Houses were rebuilt. Streets remained quiet. Life moved on. But the case left a lasting imprint. John Wayne Gacy's name became synonymous with the dangers of surface impressions. His story is often cited as a reminder that public image does not always reflect private reality. The case continues to raise difficult questions. If digital data sharing systems had existed in the 1970s, could patterns have been detected sooner? If separate reports had been connected earlier, could lives have been saved? Or was the strength of his social persona powerful enough to delay suspicion regardless of technology? Cases like this are not just about what happened. They are about what was missed, about how small, disconnected warning signs can remain invisible until someone finally connects the dots. John Wayne Gacy was not just a criminal figure in history. He became a symbol of deception, of how easily appearances can mask something far darker. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this: the house looked ordinary. The neighborhood felt safe. The man seemed trustworthy. until the truth surfaced. Think.